What's up, YouTube? Let's talk about the Cincinnati Bengals Week 7 matchup where they are coming into Cleveland. And guys, this is the game we might see Nick Chubb. I'm pretty sure we're going to see Nick Chubb. Looks like Jerome Ford isn't going to play. Regardless, let's talk about it. Nice divisional matchup. We'll get right into the breakdown. Everything you need to know, DFS wise, start sits, props. You betcha. We got you. All right. You betcha we got you. English is not Englishing. I'm tired, but we're doing this anyways. Let's start with the quarterback matchup. We got Joe Burrow, Mr. Joe Burrow against Deshaun Watson. Let's talk about what the Cleveland Browns defense allow, and then we'll also cross compare that to what Joe Burrow's props are looking like on Drafters Fantasy Sports. If you want to tail any of these props, make sure you use promo code DISCO when you sign up on Drafters Fantasy. It'll double your initial deposit dollar for dollar up to $100 skis. All right, so on average, the Cleveland Browns defense against opposing quarterbacks allow one passing touchdown per game. That's 26th best opportunity, so not very advantageous opportunity there. 26th against pass attempts at 28.83, 28th against pass completions at only 17 pass completions per game, and 23rd at pass yards per game at 210.83 pass yards. So if we're looking at Joe Burrow's props, it's really inflated, but that's because when we're looking at game script and talking about game script, one, the Cincinnati Bengals defense can't stop diddly. They really can't stop anything, and it's always going to be, a high scoring game in a shootout scenario. So Joe Burrow's passing yards are always going to be inflated. With that being said, I don't love his passing yards. I don't love his passing plus rushing. Maybe I like his over 0.5 interceptions. His passing yards is currently at 259.5. Oh, wow. It went up. On the screen, I have it at 252.5. Right now, it's at 259.5. His rushing yards are at 9.5 rushing yards. I like it, but I don't love it. Jalen Hurts struggled in the run last week, and Jalen Hurts is definitely a superior rushing quarterback. So in terms of Joe Burrow, I'm just not touching it. I'm really not touching it. So let's talk about Deshaun Watson. Definitely somebody I don't want to touch and I don't want to talk about, but we'll talk about his matchup and his opportunity. I think the only place I like Joe Burrow is one, in the drafters DFS slates. Two, you got to start him. If he's on your team, you got to start him. All right. All right. So the Bengals defense against opposing quarterbacks on average allow 1.67 passing touchdowns per game, which is the ninth most advantageous matchup. And it sucks because Deshaun Watson keeps getting these incredible matchups. Amari Cooper's gone, and he keeps shitting on him. He keeps shitting on these incredible matchups, and we can't start him. We can't play him. It's always a bust, and it's going to happen one of these games where he's just going to have a tremendous game, and he's going to be on everybody's bench, on nobody's DFS lineup. And I just can't trust him, so I'm not riding with him. If we're looking at pass attempts, the Cincinnati Bengals allow 32.5 pass attempts per game. That's 11th most advantageous matchup this week. If we're talking about pass completions, the Bengals allow 21.17 pass completions per game. That's the 14th most advantageous matchup on the week. And the Bengals allow 216.5 pass yards per game. So that's 21st most advantageous matchup on the week. So currently, right now, Deshaun Watson's passing prop is at 185.5. Passing yards, don't love it. Rushing yards at 24.5. I'd consider it. Longest rush, 10.5. I'd also consider it. Rush plus pass, 214.5. I don't love it, but I mean, I'd also consider it. But once again, he's not somebody I want to bet on. These quarterbacks, if we're talking about starts, yes, you have to start Joe Burrow, Deshaun Watson. It's a good matchup, but I just don't trust him, especially with less weapons. But we'll see if less is more, and we'll see what he does with this opportunity. Let's talk about other opportunities and what people do with it. Nick Chubb's back, guys. Nick Chubb's back. Looks like Jerome Ford is going to be out, like we mentioned earlier. But it looks like Nick Chubb is going to be in the game. He's obviously going to be limited. And I believe we're going to see a steady dose of Donta Foreman. Currently, there are no props for either Nick Chubb or Donta Foreman. So we'll wait for those to come out. But we'll talk about what the Bengals defense allow. And if you do have Nick Chubb and you got like a DeAndre Swift on a bye, I think you could borderline flex him. He's a fringe RB3, but once again, he's going to be very limited. He does have high touchdown upside. So let's talk about, once again, what the Bengals defense allows to opposing running backs on average. So it's the 8th most advantageous matchup when it comes to rushing touchdowns for running backs. They allow one rushing touchdown per game. So either Nick Chubb or Donta Foreman for anytime touchdown. Maybe even go with a mixture of both. Doesn't really matter. I think one of them are going to find the end zone, if not both. If we're talking about rushing yards, it's the 14th most advantageous matchup. The Bengals allow 104.83 rush yards per game. If we're talking about receptions to running backs, it's the 14th most advantageous, 4.5 receptions per game. And then receiving yards for running backs, they allow the 26th most, which is not really great at 26 receiving yards. It's funny how that pairs up. With that being said, Donta Foreman, borderline a flex in the deeper league. And same with Nick Chubb, borderline a flex in the deeper league. And once again, it looks like Jerome Ford is going to be out. Let's talk about what the Browns defense allows to opposing running backs. And once again, guys, we could put Zach Moss here, but it was never Zach Moss. It was always Chase Brown. And I've been beating the Chase Brown drum, and I'm going to continue to do it because he's spectacular. He's explosive. He's wonderful. I love it. And this is a pretty decent matchup for him, but not in the reception aspect. We'll get to that, though. If we're talking about rushing TDs, this is the sixth most advantageous matchup where the Browns allow at least one rushing touchdown per game. So Chase Brown anytime touchdown looks like a pretty good prop. If we're talking about rushing yards, it's also a pretty decent rushing yards day for Chase Brown. It's the 18th most opportunistic or advantageous matchup at 92.67 rush yards. Here's where it gets really ugly. If we're talking about receptions, it's the worst matchup this week for a running back. The Cleveland Browns only allow 3 receptions to opposing running backs per week, which is absolutely terrible. And then if we're talking about the receiving yards for running backs, the Cleveland Browns allow 22.67, which is the second worst matchup. But let's look at the props that we have here, see if we like any. So currently, we see that they allow 92.67 rush yards. Chase Brown's rush yards is at 53.5. If we factor in, Zach Moss may dive into that. I don't necessarily love it. I don't necessarily hate it. It's something I would consider mixing in a couple of the props. Regardless, Chase Brown is definitely a start here on out. Doesn't matter who the matchup is. He is a very, very good football player. If we're talking about longest rush, 16.5 yards. Not touching that. If we're talking about receiving yards, we're looking at 15.5 receiving yards. I kind of like it. I kind of don't. 2.5 receptions. Once again, don't love it. Don't hate it. It's Vegas did a good job with his projections. Longest reception might be the only one I'd really consider at 10.5 yards for his longest reception. But we'll move forward to the wide receiver matchup. And I'll talk to you guys about a fun little tidbit that usually smashes on a week-to-week basis. Okay, this is definitely one of my favorite locks this week and every single week because it is definitely an outlier, and we spotted it and we called it and we cashed in on it last week, just like we've done on a lot of our bets, and we're hoping to cash as well this week. Okay. So if you guys know me, you guys know I am Jamar Chase. No matter what, he was my wide receiver 1. He was my fantasy football player number 1. I was taking him number 1 overall in all my best ball drafts. Pretty much every draft out there, I took Jamar Chase, and I'm still going to beat that drum. Like, I love Jamar Chase. He's spectacular. He's absolutely exciting. Love him. Love him every single week. And I also love his longest reception prop this week and every single other week. And I'll tell you guys why in a sec. But let's talk about what the Browns defense allow on average to opposing wide receivers. It's not really an advantageous matchup. It's just like middle of the pack. They allow 10.67 receptions, which is the 19th most advantageous matchup. They allow 148.17 receiving yards to opposing wide receivers. Once again, this is positional specific, right? Which is the 14th most advantageous, and 1 receiving touchdown per game to one of the wide receivers on the opposition. So either Jamar Chase or T. Higgins could find the end zone. It's probably going to be Andre Yoshavash because announcers just love saying that kid's name. He's vultured so many touchdowns from Jamar Chase, it hurts. With that being said, that's also the 14th most advantageous matchup. I love Jamar Chase's longest reception. I also love T. Higgins' longest reception. If we look at every game the Cleveland Browns have played thus far, even against lesser wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 2 combos, and we just saw it happen again last week, they have given up at least a reception to the wide receiver 1 of 35 yards or more for the longest reception. And for the wide receiver 2, they've given up the longest reception of at least 24.5 or more, and it's hit every single week, and it's going to continue to hit. So right now, Jamar Chase's longest reception is at 25.5. T. Higgins' longest reception is at 22.5. Absolutely love both of those props. The props I really don't love is Jerry Jeudy, but we'll talk about his matchup. Right now, it's the 12th best matchup for wide receivers, but once again, Deshaun Watson's the quarterback, and we fucking hate that. The Bengals allow 12 receptions per game on average to opposing wide receivers, 144 receiving yards per game on average to opposing wide receivers. That's the 18th most advantageous. So not very advantageous, and 0.83 receiving touchdowns. So pretty much every 5 quarters, they allow a receiving touchdown to opposing wide receivers. That's the 21st most opportunistic. Right now, looks like Jerry Jeudy's props is at 49.5 receiving yards. It's doable, but like, once again, I don't trust Deshaun Watson. Longest reception is at 21.5. Longest reception, it would make sense that he hits that. But once again, Cleveland Browns avoid the notion of anything making sense on a weekly basis, and I fucking hate it. What I don't hate is a tight end matchup because it's very clear. Eric All, terrible matchup. 27th worst matchup. So it's like one of the worst 5 matchups where the Browns allow 3.33 receptions on average to the tight end position on a weekly basis, 40 receiving yards on average to the tight end position. And if there's no volume PPR format in receptions, receiving yards don't really matter for much. They are the worst matchup for tight ends when it comes to receiving touchdowns because they haven't let a single one happen to opposing tight ends. So currently there's no props or stats here for Eric All, and I wouldn't bet on them either. Anyway, I'm sure that they wouldn't be too high, and we don't want one chunk play to screw up logic. And logic, once again, out the window. Here's a very logical matchup, and I absolutely love David Njoku this week. I do believe David Njoku is now the must buy low target. If you're watching this right now, this game hasn't happened. It's currently October 17th. Go get David Njoku if he's available as a free agent. Pick him up, start him this week. He's going to be a top 5 tight end this week and every other week because Amari Cooper is gone. And when Amari Cooper was present, Deshaun Watson was forced, and not necessarily forced. Deshaun Watson had to throw to Amari Cooper because Amari Cooper is, 1, a big name, and 2, he favors wide receiver ones. Now the best target and one of the best fantasy football players at the end of last season is the only real threat. Jerry Jeudy is a non-threat in my opinion. He'll have a couple of games where he explodes, but David Njoku, the logical thing says, with all my assessment, he should absolutely splash and be spectacular. It's the 18th most advantageous matchup for tight ends when it comes to receptions at 4.33. That's what the Bengals defense allows on average. It's the 14th most advantageous matchup when it comes to receiving yards, 46.17 receiving yards. It's the 3rd most advantageous matchup when it comes to receiving touchdowns. I like David Njoku for an anytime touchdown here. With that being said, guys, that's that video. If you like the video, please like the freaking video. Smash the subscribe button. A lot of you who are watching this are not subscribing. It really does help the channel grow a long way. That's game 3 so far, and we're just about to do some edits and get game 4 out there for you guys. So I appreciate you. Love you. See you in like 25 minutes. Bye.